For more on this, let's bring in Rachel Bitecofer in Newport, Virginia. Now, she is a professor of political science at Newport University. Good morning, Rachel.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
So let's start with really the celebration that we saw from the U.S. president and many Republicans yesterday. How big of a win is this for the White House and for the party?
Well, so it wasn't necessarily something that would be difficult to secure, given they had the Senate majority that they needed and eliminated the filibuster for Supreme Court nominees. But when we take a step back and think about this, prior to 2016 as a major campaign theme for the president, the future of the court was at stake in that elections. Republicans did a better job getting voters to recognize that. And now today, 20 months later, they now control the court, as your introduction said, at least for a decade and perhaps for much longer.
Now, Kavanaugh was confirmed by a narrow margin, a vote of 50 to 48. And that's actually one of the narrowest margins for a top court nomination. So really, what does this tell you about the political climate surrounding the vote? We saw so much polarization leading up to it.
Yeah, so the political stakes of this particular appointment were much more intense than Trump's last appointment, which of course was just, a few months ago with Neil Gorsuch at the beginning of his term. In this case, though, that balance of, having a sometimes moderate, mostly conservative, but sometimes moderate vote with Kennedy is definitely going to be replaced by an ideological vote with Kavanaugh. And so that's why the stakes and the intensity were already going to be higher. And then when you threw in the possible issues in his past, alleged by Dr. Ford, that really did heighten up everything. It brought in the Me Too movement. So this is one for the record books for sure.
Speaking of that very intense period leading up to this confirmation, and we know that Donald Trump is currently on the road pushing towards the upcoming midterm elections in November. We know that the stakes were particularly high also because of those elections. But we know that we're seeing a lot of people, particularly on the Democratic side now as well, saying, all right, well, we couldn't win in stopping Kavanaugh from being confirmed. Let's show them at the polls. So how does this all play out in the midterms?
So on my Watson Center blog, I have midterm predictions that I put out in July showing the Democrats having a really strong day on November 6th. Picking up far more than the House seats they need to control the House, and really stemming what could have been an absolutely brutal Senate map for them this cycle. And although Trump wants to believe, and I don't blame him for feeling so, that he can take a victory lap and Republicans are going to be really fired up 3 weeks or 3.5 weeks from now on Election Day, that's probably not what's going to happen. In fact, Republicans will become placated by this victory, and Democrats are going to remain even more fired up than they already were. And I would have said that enthusiasm was at a bonfire before, and now it's an inferno. So I would expect that Democrats are going to have a massive enthusiasm gap heading into Election Day.
Yeah, we've seen U.S. voters have been particularly fired up, really 2016 and going forward now. Now, that's the short term when we're talking about the midterms, but let's talk about the long term for a second here. Judge Kavanaugh could be sitting on the Supreme Court as early as Tuesday, and now we've got this conservative-leaning Supreme Court in the United States. So what could be the lasting impact of this Supreme Court battle?
Yeah, so I actually would characterize this court going forward as squarely conservative. So headed into decision cycle in June, usually there's a lot of anticipation as to what's going to happen on key decisions. But I think going forward for me, it will be anticlimactic because I think those 5 votes are locked in always on the conservative end. I think a few of those justices in particular have a long history of judging things based on political ideological preferences, and I think that Kavanaugh's going to fit right in with that group. So this is going to have massive long-term implications, and that's why Republicans let their voters know in 2016, we know you don't like Trump, but vote for him and you can control the court for years and years, and Democrats never made that same case to their voters, and that's why we now have what we have going forward with the court.
All right. Well, thank you for your analysis on this today, Rachel.
Thank you so much for having me.